The Articulate Coven is the original, unofficial podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice's Immortal universe from AMC and AMC+. Welcome to Articulate Coven. We are your hosts,
Ashley Wright Eiler
and Joel Sharpton, and we are the Articulate Coven. Oh my goodness.
Oh my sweet baby Jesus. You guys, there's no non-spoiler section of this, I'm sure. That it would just be impossible.
No, so just be aware, if you haven't seen episode 5 of season 1 of Interview with the Vampire, A Vile Hunger for Your Hammering Heart, go now and watch it.
Watch it now.
We both enjoyed it quite a bit. We've got things to say, though. We've got a lot of things to say, and we're going to get right to it right now. First, off the top, before we get to anything else, I do want to say, Ashley, you and I were just discussing what a tremendous conversation already being had on our Facebook page, our Facebook group, I should say, Facebook group.
Yes.
If you do Facebook, and I understand lots of people don't for lots of good reasons, but if you do Facebook, search for the group, Articulate Coven. There's a link in our show notes as well. And go join the group and join the conversation. Every episode, we put up a spoiler thread, sometime, Sunday mornings, Sunday midday, and the conversation begins. Like, okay, we're recording this now. It's like barely 5:30 Central Time. And the post has been up for less than 5 hours. And there's like 47 comments already. Lots of good back and forth. Lots of wonderful stuff. We can bring up some of those points here and they'll inform our conversation, I'm sure, but we could not possibly do it justice to share everything that everybody is saying. So please, if you're into this, if you want to talk about the show, go join the Facebook group. So that's where I wanted to start. Ashley, let's just get into it. What are your first overall thoughts about the episode? We knew this was coming, right? We knew this was coming.
This was
or
such
something
an explosion. Everything was a lot more physical than I expected it to be. I'll be really honest. But it works. I mean, it worked. I was horrified. And then we finished the episode and my husband and I were talking about it and Brett said, I mean, to be fair to Lestat, he is trying to teach them a lesson. Like, these vampires in Europe are not going to be easy for them to deal with.
Well, the overall thing that I think occurred to me more this episode than any before, the show writers and the creators of not just this TV series, but this overall universe, these characters, many of them are going to exist in other TV shows over time, I think, as we go. So I believe that they are working hard to craft a reasonableness to almost everyone's actions, right? Not that any actions are excused, but that you can better understand than we ever did really in the novels, because the novels are each from only one perspective. And here we're already getting layers. We haven't heard Lestat's voiceover yet. I think, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. I've got some theories, honestly, about that. But even without Lestat's voiceover, we have gotten some direct hints at why he is the way he is. And just so with Claudia, more so for Claudia in this episode than any episode before, I think. We get a real glimpse of what her life was like with Lestat and Louis, why she wanted to abandon that, the things that she goes through when she tries to be an independent, and then when she returns, I wouldn't say hat in hand. Roland Jones said hat half in hand in his little post-episode discussion. I disagree with him there, too. I don't know that she came home apologetically at all, but she at least came home with an apologetic attitude, an apologetic tone, one that would say or could sort of, it could be framed as like, she made an offering and Lestat batted it away very quickly.
Yes.
But the overall point I want to say here is that these showrunners are trying to make all of these characters there are no villains in our show, as of yet, at least. There are no heroes either, right? These are all people who struggle and do terrible things to one another because of circumstances and their own bad choices.
Well, and I think too, they are villains to each other at various times, even if they aren't to the core, air quotes, villains as we, want to think. They are villainous to each other, at least from the other's perspective. So I think that this episode really kind of shows how how hard they can go at each other. And a lot of that I think has to do with like everything's heightened when you're a vampire. So of course your fights are as well. There's a lot to unpack in this, a whole lot to unpack in this. Claudia, basically, to me, it seems like they're showing in this, like they don't show us, but they tell us, I guess shit, I don't know anymore. My brain isn't working because I'm sick and on medicine, but she's basically acting just like as a predatory serial killer and just leaving bodies in places and keeping trophies of her victims and things like that. Like she, to me, in the beginning of the episode, before, the first big blow up happens, she's got no direction and no focus at all. She is acting like just a straight up serial killer.
I mean, literally collecting trophies, holding bodies, and also experimenting with making her own vampire.
Yeah, she's
and this
tragic. She's trying so hard to make a partner.
I mean, and that is I honestly can't recall from the novel whether she ever actually attempts it, but that is definitely a desire Claudia has in the book,
and she knows
to make
she's
one
too
of her
small.
own.
Yeah, and she can't. But the other thing that I think became really, really obvious in this episode is that rule about not making a child of any sort into a vampire. Claudia is so weak physically compared to these grown men vampires. All of them, every single one. She is a baby bird to them. The way she flies across the room when Lestat touches her, the way that when she's dealing with the killer at the campfire and he just barely touches her and he injures her. It's frightening when you know how predatory Armand's group can be. We have that in our heads going forward. It's terrifying. I think I'm more afraid for her than I was afraid for a more childlike Claudia, because it just seemed like, why would anyone hurt her? But there's so many reasons someone could hurt a teenage version of her.
Well, and because they aged her up. That's for me, that made the sexual violence that was not, I will say, thankfully explicit in this episode. I thought they handled that pretty well, although I dislike we'll get to there in a minute. A couple of things I want to say off the top here. First and foremost, the soundtrack is out. It's available now on all streaming services. It's available for purchase as well, but if you subscribe to any of the streaming services, you can find it there. You can, of course, I think it's even on YouTube, so you can sample it there. I will caution you, I am still staying away personally because I believe there are some track titles that are probably going to be sort of like evocative hints. There is also a track with Sam singing, and
Ooh.
I believe if I hear it, I'll have a good sense of where it comes from, which is enough of a spoiler for me for these next two episodes, and I'm not going to do it until I see the end of the season. After this season is over, I am going to drown myself in this soundtrack. So don't even worry. I'll get there with you. But if that's your bag, go ahead and dive in. If you're worried about the spoilers, though, I would just caution you. The other thing, Ashley, we forgot last week, or I should say I forgot last week to mention, episode 4 was directed by Keith Powell and written by Eleanor Burgess. I always want to call out those credits. This episode, by the way, directed by Levin Aiken and written by Hannah Moscovich, back from episode 3. So apparently Hannah knows how to make our boys fight very well.
Yes.
That's a skill of hers. Hannah, I don't know if... and I don't say this flippantly, Hannah, I don't know if you have a history of domestic violence in your past, but goodness gracious.
But yowza.
You know how to play it on screen very well, ma'am. I mean, thank you, I suppose. But I said on the Facebook group, I don't hate this episode, and I don't. This is not a bad episode. This is great television. I care very much about these characters, and even knowing it was coming, the way that it all plays out is slightly different than it is in the books, of course, because of the changing circumstances, and the way that these characters are slightly altered from their portrayal in the novels, and the combination of those things, and the fact that a visual medium like a TV series is more affecting in many ways than a novel is. I say that more viscerally affecting sometimes than a novel is. A novel will haunt you and stay with you for days and months. But
I know
this was a lot.
There are some people that really have trouble drawing the pictures in their minds, when it comes to reading something. Not everybody can see all those things. So
one of my daughters says she can't at all. I've never spoken with anyone who say they can't create a picture in their mind. One of my daughters can't.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole, yeah. So it's interesting. I think it's cool. I think that's one of the reasons why I think adaptations are so wonderful. Anything that makes things more accessible to, really experience something fully, in the way that we know the way Anne intended, for us to paint these pictures and for us to see these things. So this episode was a lot. As somebody who has had some dealings with domestic violence, it was a lot to deal with. And I don't know I didn't look to see if they had anything in the warnings. Probably nothing about domestic violence. It's just weird what bothers you. It's so strange what we all find triggering. I can watch, people have all kinds of things done to them, but yelling and breaking dishes freaking drives me crazy. I can't handle it.
Lestat punched through the head of a priest in episode 1, right?
Yeah,
so this is
and I laughed.
This is not a man who's...
I giggled.
Yes, no, we made jokes about the kid
funny.
fiddler, right?
Yeah.
But here, boy, the thing that got me, and I'm just going to jump straight to it because I think it is going to be triggering for a lot of people. Lestat says, you hear him off screen in the middle. First of all, I will say kudos to the showrunners or the director, whatever. You don't see the vast majority of the violence. The violence is implied and off screen. The vast majority of it is there's one scene as Claudia comes around the corner where Lestat is repeatedly punching Louis, and that's about as directly violent as it gets, honestly, until the very, very last moments. But off screen, you hear Lestat say, "I'm trying to restrain myself."
Yeah.
And boy, that is exactly the sort of thing that an abuser says while he's punching the shit out of the abusee, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a classic, why do you make me do this to you?
Yeah.
And yet, as the conversation has happened on Facebook in our group, and I'm telling you, there's so much good stuff there, a couple of people have called it out. Lestat says explicitly, I have fought my nature 1,000,000 times. Lestat has spent 7 years setting himself aside and waiting on Louis' grief
and
to
living
end
in
over
squalor.
Claudia. Literally squalor.
As far as
hey, look,
how Lestat's concerned, that is living in squalor, living in a hoarder house.
We've talked before about the fact that Louis will just live in a house piled up with books and newspaper with no lights on and full of rat bodies. And here he is doing it. And Lestat's still sleeping in this house with him. So it's not, listen, man, he's been there. He's put up through it. He's put his heart and his life on the line for Louis for 7 years. Literally 7 years he's waited on the grief to end. And as he says, 1,000 nights of moping, she walks in and you're going to leave me? And I understand the anger. The violence is unwarranted and unexcusable, right? There's going to have to be, if we get to, the fandom says over and over again, most of us say, oh, Louis and Lestat are endgame. And I agree. I think they are. That's the novels. That's the story that Anne wrote. I think that's the story these showrunners are writing. But boy, there is a mountain of reconciliation we're going to have to climb over and cross between here and there before we can get to it. Because some wrong was done tonight in a way that will be hard. And Ashley, I mean, I think the trailers for next week imply that he's going to have them basically in a hostage situation, maybe is what it almost seemed to me. I don't know. It seemed like maybe he's courting them at some point. But I wonder how this is going to play out from here on out. I also think maybe we're only going to get one more large scene of violence. Book readers, if you're not a book reader, I'm sorry to spoil you this, but there are 2 assassination attempts in the book on Lestat's life before Claudia and Louis break free from him. And I think maybe this is our first bout of violence, and we're going to get one more and then a departure. If you think about the way these 2 episodes lay ahead of us to finish the season, the timing of everything as we think it's been told to us from the showrunners. I mean, maybe they'll surprise us. The other thing is no screeners have come out for 6 and 7. Nobody's seen these early, so we're all flying blind as we go into it.
When I'll say this, AMC is known for some fucked up penultimate episodes for things. Everybody's craps their pants over a season finale, but AMC does not fuck around with that second to last episode.
Well, and I really like
that's
that,
just
honestly,
traditionally with them.
Because you get in the season finale, you can still get a lot of great action or a lot of great payoff, but then you also get a little denouement and a resetting of the table for whatever comes next, right? We get
definitely
a hint.
Sets up the next season.
A couple of things I do want to mention, and these will be show notes in the, or these will be links in the show notes, I should say. We didn't mention this last week. I hadn't seen it, honestly, until after the show was over and we went to Twitter and Facebook and et cetera. Claudia's diaries contain multiple handwritings. Gore on Twitter was the first one that I saw that had noticed this. One of the volumes that Daniel opens in last episode, and he turns to the first thing he turns to is a page that's marked with a rose. That page is not written in the same handwriting as the rest of the books, and it is in fact, if you zoom in super close and read it, it is text from the vampire Lestat. The year, I believe, was 1927, but I wouldn't swear to that, especially given the framing of this episode's timeline. But at some point in the past, Lestat had added his own story to one of those diaries as a token, one would imagine, for Louis. Whether or not that was before or after this episode's events, we don't know. And whether or not we'll ever get to hear that in the show, or whether it was literally just a kind of a toss-off for the fans, I don't know. But it's definitely there, and it's something to think about as we move forward, especially since the diaries continue to play such a big part.
Such a huge part. At the top of the episode, we've kind of skipped past the first big blow up in our little family that our little family has, and it's they read her diaries. Louis thinks she's so heartbroken that she's been like starving herself in her casket, and Lestat knows she's been out eating it up, but they have no idea what she's really been doing, which is killing people and burying them in land that's below sea level. Such a terrible idea for disposing of your bodies. You can't bury corpses in South Louisiana, you guys. Well,
as a guy who worked in Chalmette for a while, that would be where I would go to bury bodies too, honestly. I don't blame Claudia on that.
She lets the cops in.
Well, no. Okay, let's skip over the diaries, though. Let's go back to them reading the diaries, because this really affected me, because this is something as a parent, especially, it is... First of all, I do believe in privacy. I think everybody should have their own space and their own private thoughts, and everybody gets to feel how they want to feel about things. However, as a parent especially, you do have a duty to be sort of involved in your child's affairs. And while Claudia is not literally a child in this, especially now that she's aged up into her 20s or 30s, but at the same time, she is still a fledgling, and she's clearly making these mistakes that will not only come back on her, but could potentially cost Lestat and Louis their lives as well. I think there is a time when you got to read the diary, and I do appreciate Louis' stance on it, especially where he read what he needed to read and he didn't go further, right? He didn't go into the private thoughts. Lestat's like, I read them all. I read all the nasty things that you said about me and Louis. Yeah,
I read
the nasty bits about Louis.
I used a funny voice to make fun of you while I read it.
Yeah,
He's such a brat. He's such a brat. Like, I had never imagined that I would see this character portrayed so perfectly. He is a fucking brat. Like, a brat. I just, to see it in a way that's not like a childish brat, like it is a brat prince. I don't know. This guy is so fantastic. He really, really has it down.
He's so fundamentally hurt here. Through this whole episode, he is so heartbroken, and Sam does such a good job of playing it.
You just excuse his shitty behavior all the time.
No, I don't. No, because it isn't excusable. I am.
No, I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. I know how much you love him. Also, I want to give a shake up for the drinking game. You know, if people are drinking every
Yes.
time we agree.
Right. No, we have to start arguing more.
Yes, we got to argue more.
I will say though that like in this episode especially, I thought Sam gets to play the heartbreak and the loss with the anger and the grief and like
Yes.
and the wrath. Wrath is the word that was used over and over again in the Facebook thread. And I think that's exactly what this felt like. This felt like effectively, 23 years or whatever it's been now of pent up anger at
Right.
I've given you this gift. You said that you wanted it. I asked you, is this what you want to do? And you said yes. And you joined me on this road, and I've been over backwards to satisfy the fact that you don't want to kill people. Yeah, I've hidden my own kills. You say that it bothers you when I screw other people? Excellent. You don't even know about it anymore. You wanted a child? I gave you a child. You wanted a saloon? I gave you a saloon. You want, over and over again. And yet, and also, by the way, it's clear now again in this episode, Lestat's also been hiding his power, right? Just like in the novels, he has been hiding the overwhelming vampiric nature that he has to offer, that predator natural power that Anne loves to reference so much. God, I mean, I understand it's a roiling fire that Louis and Claudia have been stoking here, and then though the thing that I loved most from Sam in this episode, and then we'll talk about Claudia because we got to get to Bailey. She won this episode, I think.
Yeah.
But Sam does one thing in this episode that I particularly love, and it's something that absolutely is true to Lestat in the books. I think some of the things in this episode maybe not so much, but this is he goads Ashley. He can't help himself but goad. When she comes back, apology not accepted. When they first confront about the diaries, she says, "Did you read the others?" Louis says no. First of all, it wasn't true. Louis read some of them out loud and he knew that, but we don't need to go into that.
Yeah.
I have this information. We have to confront you about this thing you're doing wrong as a child and a parent, and we're going to get back on track. And a bad vampire, right? And Lestat is like, "No, I read the things that you said, the mean things you said about Louis. He knows them all." He just can't help himself.
No, and he wants to drive a wedge between them. He's very jealous of their connection. I mean, that's very, very clear and always has been. Even though he says it's not, he says he's not. He knows he is. He can't talk to either of them the way they can talk to each other.
Boy, and that's something we sort of downplayed in our last episode as well. The fact that Claudia and Louis have this, mind gift. That is, again, neither one of them have the ability to speak telepathically or hear telepathically in the novels. But here they do. They can speak to each other. They are still blocked from Lestat, but they can speak to each other. Boy, they don't use it a lot, right? It's at least implied that they don't use it very often. First and foremost, Lestat tells them no secrets. Please don't do that. And they both say that they're not going to. But it sort of seems that they don't very often. Louis uses it once to kind of warn Claudia about her behavior. Claudia used it a few times, I think, to goad Louis. But
he doesn't know that. And Lestat doesn't know that. He doesn't know they don't do it very often, or to him, in the way he is, it's some connection that they have that he's not a part of, and so he's assuming they're using it all the time. That's how I would feel, like if I was involved with two people in that way and that they could communicate with each other in a way that didn't involve me or didn't include me. That's why I can't be in a poly relationship, y'all. I would feel so left out and hurt.
Oh, even in a non-romantic relationship, if you talk, okay, let's go to this parent-child triangle.
Yeah.
Well,
or
even with the parent-child triangle, or friendships, absolutely. But I'm thinking about like with my wife, my children and I. Okay, I mean, obviously we don't have favorites, but at the same time, like you have a different relationship with each child, right?
Yeah, and you
some of those relationships, are inherently more compatible than others, and so like you develop this sort of like shorthand or maybe an inside joke or something, and anytime that's exposed to the family at large, it's like a raw nerve, and you don't mean it that way. You don't mean to hurt anybody else by having that sort of intimate connection with one of the other members,
right.
And yet it's a slap in the face. It's a reminder, oh, none of the rest of you are in on this.
And it's like, oh, well, that's their thing. Well, let's let them go do their thing, you know?
Anyway, beautiful layers to this episode. I want to talk about Bailey, though, for a second. So first and foremost, she absolutely wins the episode. She got her showcase here. I don't know if they're going to give her another big one, but she lived up to the billing. She lived up to this role, to all of our expectations. Yeah. I still don't love the accent, but she pulled her weight and then some, and the accent is never a hindrance for me at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't,
nowhere
it
in the
doesn't
episode.
ruin it. Yeah, it doesn't ruin it. There were a couple of times that I was like, ouch, but it doesn't. I mean, I let it go. I let it go really quick. One of them was in a really freaking good moment, too, and I was just like, oh, why'd you do it like that? But she's amazing.
There's one of the times where telepathically she says, come with me, Louie, or something like that, and the way that she says it is it was a bad read, I thought. But the few and far between were those
very
moments.
Very much, yeah. That's being hypercritical.
I love that Claudia's sexuality in this series is all her own. She's not attracted or attached to Louis in that way. Louis and Lestat, neither one of them are interested in her in that way. It's called out specifically in this episode. She says, which one of you are going to fuck me?
Yeah.
I mean, which I thought, by the way, that great delivery there. But it's said because it is absurd. She knows neither one of them want her. She doesn't want either one of them. It is purely a father-daughter relationship.
Turning the fucking knife, though, right there to say, oh, I like more full-figured gals,
See? He's
Fuck
got a goad.
He's
got a goad. Yeah. Everybody knows that it wasn't
so manipulative.
He just can't help himself, though. It's so ridiculous the way. But okay, so earlier in the episode, though, when they're reading the diary, the very hint of sexuality she makes reference to, will I be a virgin every time I do it?
Yeah.
Both of the guys are repulsed and repelled. They drop the diary at first. Lestat leaves the room, but it shows how, in so many ways, they did Claudia a disservice in her creation.
Oh my God, big time.
And her raising.
So, God, I think that would be so fucked up that's fucked up.
They're unprepared to raise a vampire. They're unprepared to raise a vampire.
They were not ready for a family, Joel. They were not ready. They jumped in and they were not prepared.
But they're also, neither one of them are prepared or capable of raising a woman either. And here they have both,
Well,
anyway,
it's almost like neither of them really know how to treat a woman, which is an interesting thought too, because they just don't. I'll be interested to see how Lestat and Jesus, his mother,
Gabrielle, what's the relationship like?
What's their relationship like? Well, I mean, we know it's pretty fucked up, but like they don't know how to treat a woman. That I guess they don't know how to treat a woman. They don't know how to fuck. They don't want to fuck. Maybe
you're right.
That's it.
Well, and even there, they don't. I mean, I don't know. I guess he treats Antoinette all right, though, doesn't he? Oh, by the way, Antoinette, back into the series.
Yeah, her flat ass singing torch songs.
Oh my God, I love the reference to that no ass having a white girl who sings torch songs. I thought that was perfect. Especially because we know that Claudia has body issues, right? So the very idea that she's noticed. And also, he's already mentioned, I think, at that point, the fuller figure thing too, right? Well, she don't have no fuller figure. All of that was excellent. I loved, by the way. Let's move forward slightly in the episode. It's in the middle of Prohibition now, and so we get to go to a speakeasy.
Oh,
I wondered what was happening
I was very excited. That was
like,
so great.
Are they showing us? My first thought was, is this a vampire bar?
A vampire bar?
I was like, no, it's not. No, it's just Prohibition. I forgot. Okay. So we get another scene with Tom Anderson, who, by the way, this actor in this portrayal is just delightful. I think Tom Anderson is fantastic. I especially like his line to Louis. I wrote it down. Let's see. It's always a straight line with you, Louis. Louis, he's talking about they've asked him to run for representative.
Right.
And Louis is just like, so more money? Just like cut straight to the point. And Tom Anderson says, it's always a straight line with you, Louis. I will say, I think that is some of Louis's problem. Louis, in the books and in the show, deals a little bit too much with absolutes and
black and white.
He cannot allow for the gray area, the sort of wandering across the line, which ends up causing him struggle after struggle after struggle after struggle.
We'll see that time and again with him. Like, that's a constant with him. That's his constant struggle. Poor Louis.
Yeah, absolutely. There was, where did I got lost thinking about Tom Anderson. That beautiful mustache.
It is a good mustache.
I hope we get one more scene with him.
I do too. We had that slow down scene in the speakeasy, which I always love them using that little of Lestat's magic. And he marks his cheek.
So Kelly asked me if that was for anything. I think it was literally just, I want to hurt him. I can't really hurt him.
I can't really.
And I'm assuming the idea there is that he bewitched Tom. Louis goes and bewitches the police chief to sort of forget about them, is the idea there. That's what I got from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he couldn't help on the way out the door. I'm at least going to cut your cheek, you asshole,
Of course he can't help it. Lestat can never help it. Oh, God. This episode really did. I was like, God damn it. This is everything that's terrible about Lestat, all like shoved into 52 minutes of discomfort for Ashley.
One of our listeners, Derek, is reading the novels for the first time right now. He finished Interview with a Vampire, I think, just before the show started. He's just finished The Vampire Lestat the other day and has already started Queen of the Damned. But he sent me a quote the other day from The Vampire Lestat. "You are the damnablest creature, Lestat." And it's a quote from Marius from The Vampire Lestat. But he absolutely is. He is the damnedest creature. And you can't. He's so charismatic and he is so lovable and he is so good in so many ways. And yet, here again and again and again, you just say, boy, if you just kept your mouth shut, this probably would have resolved itself.
About 25 years of therapy would do him really good. Like, straight through weekly therapist, learn how to communicate with those you love in ways other than biting them.
just like him and Daniel locked in that room in Dubai, just chit-chatting it out, figuring it out, listening to Daniel, cut him down again and again. Speaking of Daniel, there's a great line from him here in the middle. He and Louis are talking about Claudia. Charlie Manson wrote a couple of beautiful songs, but he was still Charlie Manson. Louis also makes a great quote there, which he repeats later. "I won't have her exploited." So let's talk about the interaction between the two of them here in the middle of the episode, especially. So there are torn pages from the book. This was hinted at in the trailer for last week, and I thought this was maybe a call forward to the novel Merrick. There are some missing pages, some torn out pages of Claudia's diary that are used as a major plot point in the novel Merrick. That is not what happened here. Louis removed a few pages that are directly about the interaction between and the assault from the character Killer, the young sort of biker vampire that meets up with Claudia here.
Is that the same actor that you sent me those pictures of from Instagram?
No. So
okay, I didn't think so. The
one that I had sent you from Instagram, that guy is the guy that the fandom thinks might have been cast as Armand.
Right.
So this,
but at first I was like, is this the same guy?
No, this actor looked, and it's not the same actor, but this looks like the Coppola kid. He doesn't go by Coppola though. What's his name? He was in all of Wes Anderson's movies.
Oh, I'm of no use because you said Coppola doesn't go by Coppola, and all I can think of is Nick Cage now. I'm ruined.
You're going to know him when I say his name. Jason Schwartzman. Sure I will. I thought of it while I was even looking him up. Yeah, Jason Schwartzman. So this actor looked so much like Jason Schwartzman to me. Especially, we watch this show occasionally on a projector in our bedroom, and we watched it today on the projector like during the middle of the day, and so it was all a little washed out and like not quite as bright as you might like. But boy, with that and just the voice and the attitude, he was very Jason Schwartzman to me.
That is
so
hilarious.
Killer is a character from the novels, not exactly laid out like here. I looked him up in the alphabetary earlier today. I'll just give you the top range. So he was created in 1925 in the novels, so it would have worked. I mean, theoretically at least, but he would still be a very young vampire if that was the case. In the novels, he doesn't show up until Queen of the Damned. He is in a group called the Fang Gang, which is referenced here. He's got several chapters in the Queen of the Damned alongside his girlfriend, paramour, Baby Jinx. And It's Baby Jinx, Killer, and the Fang Gang. Those are those chapters that go along. I won't give the result of their storyline. I will say Killer has a resurgence later in the books and shows up in the Prince Lestat trilogy as well. I don't know that will be the case here. They've changed quite a lot of things, I would say. First of all, the timeline is a little different. I don't think in 1930 or 1928, wherever we are when that takes place, I don't think that he would already be riding motorcycles. Maybe I'm wrong, but that seems early to me. And then the other thing is that the characterization of Killer here, the Killer is, I mean, correct me somebody please if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I've read Queen of the Damned the last time, but I don't think the character of Killer would have been a rapist. And in here, he clearly rapes Claudia,
Yeah, I don't think that was, I feel like this is more of like a little drop-in for us, and we might see him again if and when we get to Queen of the Damned.
And it may be
that will probably be it. But if we do, maybe we'll get a little justice, a little.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Justice for our Claudia.
Yeah, if anything, it seems to me like this is one of those situations where they're like, hey, let's make somebody that we actually want to see Akasha explode at a later date, perhaps. So. That scene was rough, but I think the primary reason for it was, just as you said, it's not just Lestat. Any vampire, basically,
is stronger than her,
could and will crush Claudia.
Yeah. She's just physically smaller. I mean, I am a physically smaller person than a lot of people, and I think of myself as quite a badass, but I know that once you get to a certain size, I can't fight you off. You know what I mean? That's reality. That's real. And so that is something that I think is very important to show the danger that she is in, and she doesn't even really know it.
Interesting to me, too, that the writers decide to give us effectively like a college sexual assault storyline.
Yeah. I mean like, it's way more common than any college would like to admit that happens on their campuses.
And obviously, neither one of these characters are actual students at the universities, but effectively, Claudia is taking her college years here. She spends 7 years wandering, and what does she tell Lestat when she comes back that she's done? I started reading books.
I read a lot of books.
She educated herself. She lived a lifetime through, a gaining of knowledge, and she did that. Where would you do that in the South in the 1920s? College campuses. That'd be about the only place to do it.
Yeah.
So I like that part of the storyline. I do know a handful of people who have already said some version of, I kind of like Killer. I don't know what they did here, but I think mostly it's just as you said. They decided to give her this experience where she interacts with an American vampire. They needed it or wanted it to be somebody from the books, kind of obscure, that they could change the storyline and not really affect anything. I think this mostly does it. I'm kind of okay with it. I just wonder, did we have to make it a sexual assault? I always think, and 10 years ago, I wouldn't have asked that question.
No, you're right.
Rape is a common story plot. It's been used for the entire history of filmed entertainment, I would say. And even before that, it was a common plot thread in books as well, because it is a dramatic event. However, I mean, especially like this, I think Game of Thrones is what finally broke it for people. We had effectively one whole season where Sansa's just raped over and over and over and over and over again. And you're like, what is this all for exactly? Like what are we gaining here? We've seen that she's downtrodden. We understand.
You told us.
Yeah, we understand she's oppressed. What do we gain from it? And I wonder here, what do we gain from Claudia? This could have been just an assault.
It could be, but the only things I can think are the fact that it is, it's easy to forget because she's a vampire that she's still a girl. She's still a woman. She's still vulnerable. She's still, what, 1 out of 5 women, y'all? Come on. I think I mean, in order to show her in danger, you might have to show her in danger in the way that so many women that just walk through this earth are in danger on a daily basis. And they didn't show it. It wasn't gratuitous, so it didn't bother me as much as it could have. But I do think that it's one of the few ways you can show that someone with her power and her strength is still in danger, is still vulnerable as any woman, as any young girl would be.
This is the very reason I had a conversation with someone last week, Ashley, and we were discussing future podcasting plans, and I made the statement that I will never again start a show that has a co-host that is not a woman, probably, and more than likely a woman of color. And it's specifically for what you just did. You gave me context on this in such a pithy. As a matter of fact, it's going to be a clip. I'm going to share that as a clip from this episode. They showed us what happens to 1 in 5 women. Like, that's the danger. What is it? What is a danger to a woman vampire? The same danger that's to a woman.
Yeah,
just
it's the same reason it's scary to be a woman is the same reason it's scary to be a woman vampire. Yeah, that's so fucking real.
And so that's why they showed it, honestly. That's why they used it, just as they've done time and time again. They've given us an opportunity to see through the lens of genre, a glimpse into real-life problems, real-life issues, and the real things that we face. I love it.
It brings our characters back down to earth. It brings our characters, back to reality in a way. Like, what the fuck? How on earth would she suspect that could happen to her? She's a vampire.
So this is going to be the episode that writes 1,000 bad takes. I guarantee you there will be a million think pieces written about this. Every blog, all of 100%. All of Tumblr.
Well, and I think that, I mean, you guys, there's plenty to not like. I get it. I could get people being like, why the hell are we getting this Claudia goes around to college thing? Like, I totally get it. I mean, just remind yourself, it's an adaptation. Take a breath. It's moving the story along in a brilliant way. We're getting a lot of like really beautiful, rich storytelling. We're getting glimpses into these characters that feel really real, that don't feel fake, and that don't feel out of place. So even though it's different, it still feels right.
Well, you know what? Everybody take a drink, because I agree with you, Ashley. So
Theraflu for me.
A couple of scenes I want to touch on before we get to the final fight properly. Lestat is standing in the window getting dressed, and Louis is laying in a bed covered in newspapers, eating rats, and he's reading.
He's in his depression bed.
Right. He's literally in his depression
nest. We've all had a depression nest.
Boy, and even the outfit here and his hair is wild too. Like I just, the whole look of Hobo Louis is really, really book true. It's really, really honest, because he's still beautiful too, right? You understand why
I still love him.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, Lestat's getting ready, and Louis is saying, oh, this has got to be Claudia. It's Claudia here that they're writing about. She's killed all these people in all these different universities, and isn't it crazy? And can you believe it? It's Claudia. It's got to be Claudia. And Lestat says, it could be Claudia, but I am the one that is standing here in front of you. That was that moment.
Yeah.
And first of all, you can write it off as catty, because he then first of all, he's kind of looking out the window at Antoinette, waiting on him.
Right.
And he says, I've got all the proper appendages, and I'm a full-grown, full-blooded adult, unlike Claudia. And if you're going to keep overlooking my considerables, and Louis isn't even listening to him. He's still rambling about Claudia and the thing. And so Lestat leaves him. But it's so clear there he doesn't want to. It's so clear there that he is depressed as well. Lestat doesn't wear his depression bed like Louis is, but Lestat is in this deep fucking funk because he is in love with a man who may never say it or show it back. And Ashley, as a guy who has lived in that relationship once or twice myself, that is a depression that it hit me hard before we got to the end of this thing.
It's a good deep ache, like being in love with someone that doesn't love you back is horrible. It's so horrible. I've been there.
Well, and
I have definitely
so wonderful. So wonderful that they show us the power imbalances, right? Lestat is the stronger in this relationship. He has the knowledge. He has the actual physical strength, the preternatural strength. Louis is the one that's in charge of the relationship, though, because Lestat will never abandon Louis. Louis would have to drive him away. Lestat is the one that needs Louis so much. Louis would have been fine these 7 years alone in that house with his newspapers and rats. Lestat has stayed. Why? Because he can't be without him. Why didn't he ever abandon him? Why didn't he kill him? It's because Lestat loves him in a way that Lestat can't even honestly process, probably. Now, that still doesn't... I'm not excusing any of his actions, but I'm telling you, this... I will never hear anybody say that Lestat doesn't truly love Louis or Lestat isn't committed to Louis in the way that he says he is, et cetera, et cetera. This episode, to me, shows it.
I agree with you, and I think that another thing is that these are loves that are going to be experienced and relationships that are experienced over decades and eventually centuries, and so you have to take all that shit into account too. It's not just like I was in love with this person when I was 20 and they didn't love me back. It's like I've been in love with this man for 3 lifetimes and he still doesn't love me. It's so much worse. And Lestat is also very egotistical in the idea that someone wouldn't fall for him. Everyone's always fallen for him. Why would you not love me the way that I deserve to be loved?
Boy, and that's the actual line there. Boy, that one broke my heart personally. All right, let's go the last couple of scenes here. Once again, the inciting incident that brings this all to a head comes from Louis' family. Louis' mortal life is truly once and for all over. He gets a call from Grace, meet me at the cemetery, and they don't reveal it until the very end of the conversation, but Grace has marked the family mausoleum with Louis' death dates. Louis died 53 years old, 1930, and she says, I need this for my family, and says goodbye to him. I thought that was a great scene. I don't think we're going to see Grace again. I
don't think so either.
I think
she served the purpose, and we're at that point of separation now that you can't go back.
Yes, absolutely. And it's the final straw. Like, she made the choice for Louis, which honestly sort of feels very true to book Louis. Louis is never a decisive fellow. Right. Grace makes the choice for him. Your mortal life is over. You're done now. You're disconnected from everything. Yeah, you did. I'm going to take the trust. And that's the other thing. One imagines also that there's not much of the trust left. She says the stock market crash wiped them out. Yeah. But moving up north, I wonder if we'll see. We know in the novels some vampires sort of track their human families. I wonder if Louis will ever try to see how the Frenier family, now that they're not Point de Lacs anymore, how the Frenier family fares over time. Will we ever get maybe even a Babette that's a descendant of the Freniers that Louis revisits at some point in one of the future seasons? That's an interesting something that's out there, but I think the point of this...
I think they've probably let it go. I think this is it for his, his mortal life. And we're also about to shove off across the ocean. I mean, we don't have too much more time in New Orleans right now.
Well, and I think that's the real point. The real point was to put Louis in a bad way, even more than he was, like one final moment to send him home literally in tears, and then Claudia capitalizes on that moment to return. And boy, the beginning of this scene, again, we've already praised Bailey, but the beginning of this scene is so good. They have this beautiful reunion, Louis and Claudia do, where it's so clear the affection that they have for each other.
And he thanks her for coming back.
But the record scratch, Ashley, the record scratch as Lestat stops it. And I just knew, I was like, I mean, and also...
we're in for it now.
I could feel the runtime was almost done too, right? I'm like, well, here we go. This is our final scene. From the moment that she entered, I think Lestat was hot, and I think there would have been a physical altercation no matter what else happened. However...
Oh, yeah. It was
They
brewing.
both goad each other into it. Claudia then abandons. They start just literally tugging on either arm of Louis. And Louis, again, just as we just said, indecisive as always, doesn't make a choice, doesn't stand up for himself, and leaves it to these two hothead assholes to resolve.
Once you'll find out.
Yeah, well, but you can't be surprised that, honestly, at that point, you can't be surprised when Louis doesn't get between them in some way, some physical way, that Lestat ends up throwing Claudia, which is the impetus then for the actual fight. Louis then finally retaliates and begins to physically fight Lestat, and then it's on. You know, I mean, it's John Wick 4, except it's all off screen.
Oh. It was that was so great though. What a great lens to show that through. Giving most of it to us from like Claudia's perspective. We were with her through most of that fight. Most of that fight we wouldn't actually want to see, I'm sure. So getting to see just like bits and pieces of it were so violent and horrifying. Like when Louis hit the wall, like by the door, Jesus Christ, and there were these claw marks up and down the stairwell, up and down the stair handle. Jesus, it was so violent. It was so brutal.
Well, and already earlier in this episode, we had seen from Louis what these fingernails can do as he was carving the dining room table, right? So we see how dangerous, and we've seen earlier, Lestat scratches the cheek with no effort whatsoever. These are deadly, dangerous weapons on their hands, and here they've been put to use against each other in an animalistic, terrible way. You're absolutely right. Having it all be portrayed through Claudia's eyes, though, honestly is more affecting than if they had just shown it as an outright brawl, because it so clearly is that mommy and daddy are beating the shit out of each other. In this case, mommy and daddy happen to be very powerful vampires, but still, Jesus, it was, I mean, just uncomfortable and sad and frightening and triggering. Absolutely.
And also like just for people who like fights in movies and theater, Joel and I both have stage combat training and learned how to sword fight when we were in college. So seeing a really good fight that's well constructed and well done, like that, it was really impressive on that side of it too, like just the structure of it.
And that tells a narrative, right? Like you saw the moments where Lestat would not give up, but would relent and would be sort of let go for a second, and then Louis would attack, and then Louis was sort of pleading that it was over, but then something would push Lestat over the top and he would go again. All of those moments are, you know, Mark Gwynn's our theater professor and fight director and mentor in this area. One of the things that's always stuck with me for him is he's like, you know, you can have a big battle scene where you have 15,000 extras and they're all fighting each other, but if you can't follow the narrative of the battle, what is happening here, not just interpersonally for each individual combatant, but the overall arc of the battle, how do things go, then it's worthless. Here, we don't see most of the battle, and yet the arc of it, the story of the battle, how things went, is so clear. Honestly. Really well done. Really well done, even though it's disgusting.
Oh, horrifying. And the most horrifying thing one of the most horrifying things I think I've ever seen in a television show or a movie ever was him dragging Louis by his chin.
I'm assuming he
mandible,
had literally
had
a
mandible
his
claw.
Jaw.
Like Jesus Christ, that felt like a wrestling move gone so wrong.
Like you would have
dragging him down. Yes.
That's what I thought. Like you shove your hand into their gills and you're holding them by the gills, kind of thing. That's what it felt like, and it was. Oh, that was terrible. That was terrible. But there, again, even then, even here in this moment of brutality, as he's dragging Louis out, he can't help but goad. Claudia calls out to him, Uncle Les, please. And he says, it's Uncle Les suddenly. And then he turns and she says,
take me. I'm the one. And he's like, it was never you.
It was never you. And honestly, first of all, as many of the other things that Lestat has said in this episode, there's truth there, right? It was never, he didn't want Claudia. At least as portrayed in this. We may find when Lestat tells his own story that he had his own thinkings about Claudia along, and we haven't seen those yet. But as laid out so far, this was what Louis wanted, and it was a way for Lestat to keep him there.
To keep Louis there. Yeah. So much of what he does.
It failed.
Yeah, miserably, because this is our our dynamic duo is on the way out the door. We've got 2 episodes left. This is going to be all about the grand exit.
So he tosses off this line to Claudia. It was never you. And then he ascends. Sam told us in the official podcast in the I think it was the second episode where they did their Sam Reed interview. Sam mentioned that the cloud gift was coming, and we see it here. I think it's beautifully done, by the way. Hey, here's a moment I want to take to say, I mentioned earlier we watched this on the projector as sort of like washed out, not as bright as you would want. My second watch is always on my iPad. I've got an iPad Pro that's got like the crazy XDR screen. I turn my brightness up. I can see everything beautifully. I can see every detail. But this show, if you're not watching it on a low quality projector in the middle of the day, is unlike Game of Thrones or House of Dragon, I've heard as well. You can always see things, even though it's filmed all at night, even though it's often filmed in the dark. Everything is still available to see. They're not hiding things in the shadows. That is a choice that a lot of cinematographers make, especially in the world of HDR. I understand you want that dynamic range. You want to live in the blacks like you're the Godfather. You know, the cinematographer for the Godfather said he wanted to play right on the edge of shadow. And there's a lot of scenes in those movies where that is absolutely the case. You're right there on the level of black, or can you see anything at all? This show does a great job of that, and I just wanted to call it out. The cloud scene is one of those where it's the middle of the night, but everything is still there for you to see. It's a lovely display of power. It's a lovely display of the city and of the special effects that they've built here, all in the middle of this incredibly heart-wrenching, brutal moment as Lestat drains Louis as he flies him up into the air, and then he basically begs him for a breakup. You know, just tell me that you're never going to love me. It would be so much easier for me.
And the thing is I don't think at ever any point Louis doesn't love Lestat here. Maybe up until this big ass fight happens, he just doesn't love him the way he wants to be loved. Maybe you assholes should have a conversation about that. You think?
Boy, 30 years of
that might have been a conversation before you had a baby. I don't know. I don't know.
Might have been a conversation before you decided to become a vampire and live the rest of your life with this dude too. But you know, who am I?
Also that.
Listen,
look, who are we to judge? We don't know. We're not vampires.
The younglings that are listening to us, though, here's the lesson to take away from this. Don't rush into a marriage, friends. We're not tied to each other for immortality, perhaps, and our exits don't have to be like this. But at the same time, a long-term relationship is a commitment. Don't go into it blindly.
I don't think a baby's going to fix your problems.
Yeah, baby is never going to fix your problems. I do love, though, that he drains Louis. I think this is I do like that part of it. He's beat the shit out of him here, but I think the draining is one of those things that powerful vampires often do to weaker ones. And it is, it's still intimate. It is still involved in their relationship. He's taking Louis into himself, and yet also he's punishing him and physically hurting him. And
well, he's taking back what he gave him in a way.
Yes,
you know?
Yes, exactly. And then Louis says, "Put me down." I still don't know how I feel about Lestat dropping Louis. Lestat
it's a long way down. It's a real long way.
First of all, I don't think Louis in the books would have survived that fall. I think he would have been little brain mush all over the sidewalk, and that would have been the end of it. But still, this is even more than the beating. This is the moment for me that I think, you know, we've talked about how much I think Anne would love this show. I think Anne would have hated this episode.
Yeah, she would not have loved this, I don't think.
She never wrote Lestat beating Louis. Not like this. Lestat does a lot of things.
No, we actually talked about that last episode. I think that things don't normally get physical between the two of them violently, you know.
Now, if this was season 2 and this is an Armand Lestat fight, makes total sense. Absolutely, from the books. They beat the hell out of each other a lot of different times throughout history. But
he's not that way with Louis generally.
Well, and the dropping specifically, like the dropping him from, I mean, I understand the way that it played out in the show. It makes sense. And I suppose they could come back and retcon this too and say, oh, it didn't actually happen that way. It was X, Y, and Z. And this is, Claudia's thinking. But I don't know. It was a lot for me. Hey, will you give me like 30 seconds real quick?
Of course.
Yeah, just a second. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, I got so upset about my poor baby Lestat that I was verklempt. I needed to go collect myself for a minute. No, So yeah, I don't know about the dropping. I mean, I understand why they did it. I understand how it's going to play out in the season, I think. And again, this had to escalate. It
was great
to something.
special effects.
Fantastic special effects.
Holy shit.
And one imagines we're going to get some good special effects in the next episode as Louis repairs himself.
Heals.
Yeah, I mean, Lestat's got to give him blood, right? That's going to be the immediate resolution. Lestat's going to give him blood.
He has, but Claudia's probably isn't enough to fix him.
Yeah,
he's going to need some help. Yeah, he was in bad shape when we saw him crunched up on the ground.
I'll say this:
it's looking like some Stranger Things shit up in there.
Yeah, I know, right? God, those legs all akimbo. The violence is not over for the season, folks. So if this was heavy for you, go ahead and prepare yourself. I don't know whether it's coming next episode or whether it's coming in the 7th episode, but what's coming. Yeah, this family does not end well, I'm afraid, and we already know that it is fundamentally flawed and fractured, and so it is going to be delicious and also hard.
Deliciously horrifying.
Yeah, deliciously horrifying. There you go. You go. Such wonderful portrayals.
Horrifying.
So well written, so well portrayed on screen, and yet
what an awesome season this has been.
Horrible to watch. And isn't it fascinating how they're able to portray, just as Anne did in her novels, the horrific nature of humanity itself, not vampirism, right? Like, it's not the vampire powers really that make these people so terrible to one another.
Yes, it's the human parts that they don't know how to work anymore, or ever, if they ever knew how to be, how to deal with rejection, how to deal with love, how to be a good partner, how to be a good parent, how to be, a friend. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's the same stuff we all have trouble with.
Yes, absolutely true. All right, let's move into our Easter egg section. There's a couple of things to talk about here as we get ready for the final 2 episodes. Folks, go watch episode 6 and join us next week if you're not into some of the speculation territory. If so, continue onward with that warning. Boy, Ashley, they went right off the top and blew all of our theories about Rashid being a vampire or Rashid being
they were like,
Armand.
haha, those dum-dums really thought they knew what was up. He's not a vampire.
So I did see some speculation, even in our Facebook group, the thread there, where people were like, well, I don't know. I mean, Louis drank a whole lot from him. He didn't seem to be even woozy or weak at all. True. But Louis specifically calls out, before Rashid offers himself to me, he eats, what was it?
Pineapple and honey.
Yeah, pineapple and honey. And we've already established that vampires don't eat food, so that's not and you wouldn't need it to sweeten vampire blood. Vampiric blood is its own drug. So I'm gonna say here definitively, I say Rashid's not a vampire, which just makes his whole storyline a whole hell of a lot more interesting, honestly, for me. Who is he? Why is he here with Louis? Like, how did they get connected? Is this, in this episode, I would say more so than any other, I think this might actually be Louis's house. This Rashid in this episode says to me, I am working for Louis, not for anybody else. The nature of the way that he defends him and talks about him here, Rashid clearly has affection for Louis in a way that we weren't certain, I think, before this.
Right. Before, it very much seemed kind of master-servant sort of thing, whereas...
Or even somebody else's servant.
Not even someone else's
invited
servant.
Guest.
Yeah, like a little bit more standoffish, but everything seemed quite more intimate this time around.
Yeah, I really don't know where they're going with this, but I am super excited about it. Rashid also, interesting little comment, he tells Daniel that this is a suicide attempt, this book that they're writing together, that as soon as it's public, these powerful vampires all over the world are going to find
be
Louis.
After Louis.
They're going to scale this tower, and they're going to paint these walls with Louis's blood. Interesting to me, that line really feels like something, and maybe I'm misremembering, but it really feels like something that's said to Lestat when he's making his plans about the vampire Lestat clear. I'm going to write these songs. I'm going to be a rock star. I'm going to make these videos. I feel like maybe even Marius says the old ones are going to hunt you down and kill you. I can't.
Yeah,
protect
that's
you.
definitely part of the conversation. Like that's 100% part of the conversation. That's definitely discussed. Like that's like, here come, if people know what you are and what you've done that you've told people about us, it's on, motherfucker. I mean, that's even, yeah. It's on, motherfucker.
It occurred to me, and we've talked before about, are they going to give Louis, some of Lestat's adventures, since they're clearly trying to make Louis more of a main character throughout the series, one would imagine. Here's an example where maybe it's Louis's story and the hubbub around it that forces Lestat's hand in making music of some sort and trying to awake Akasha. Maybe he's trying to protect Louis. Like maybe the old ones do rise up against Louis.
Get the attention off of him.
and Lestat is like, the only one that can save him is Akasha. I'll wake her.
Hey, look over here. Or he's just trying to distract them.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's interesting ways they could go there. I am fairly certain, though, at this point, based on those conversations between Rashid and Daniel and Louis, these modern day events are pre Queen of the Damned. Akasha has not awoken yet, or at least is not public yet, and I think we're still going to get there.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, how could you not tell that story? It's so lush. You know what the hell? It's the only other one they made a movie out of. Like,
right?
Go back and fix it. I know you want to, guys. If they really care about this world and these books, they want to fix that movie.
I mentioned earlier, Derek just finished The Vampire Lestat, and he was telling me how much he enjoyed the reunion scene before the concert, which it occurred to me like, boy, what if that is the first time that we see Louis and Lestat together in the modern day? Is at the concert? It'd be really beautiful as a way to sort of like bring that all together, and from then on we can have modern day adventures. But anyway, that would be very fitting and very true to the novel, actually. So yeah. Cool. One more thing, there was one other, where was it? Okay. There is a really, really excellent thread that I found on Twitter this past week, and I want to put this link in the show notes as well. A historical thread. This comes from Dominique. It's just a list of things in this first season that they could pull direct historical context. There's some maps and layouts of Storyville, for instance. Ooh. There are some pamphlets of like blue books, which were guides to the Storyville's sex services. One of which, by the way, Lestat is reading in the scene in the square when they're looking at when he's reading the like, hey, this square did such and such and whatever.
Oh yeah,
that's apparently from a blue book. He's awesome. Also got a blue book earlier when he is first getting to New Orleans looking for Louis. He's holding a blue book there. There's some stuff about Tom Anderson, who I've already mentioned how much I love him in this show. He's a real life historical figure, and they've got some stuff there. There's a bunch of stuff about Jelly Roll Morton and the madams, the different madams that are shown in the show. So anyway, go and read the whole thread. It's linked in the show notes. Very, very cool stuff, and a bunch of stuff that I didn't know or hadn't heard of. I think Dominique is going to do some more of these in the future. They just kind of like literally ran out of room in this thread.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so much fun. This is one of my favorite things about shows that are set in a historical context. It really lets us, it gives you a good excuse to kind of delve into a little bit of history.
Absolutely. I am excited that they brought Antoinette back. I mentioned this in the show. Antoinette is a gender swap version of Antoine from the novel. I think that gender swapping makes perfect sense here, specifically because it causes more of a rift between Louis and Lestat, exactly because she is a white woman in public. The two of them could be seen together, and that is one of those things that eats at Louis more than anything else. She's still alive. Lestat says in this episode to Louis when he's trying to sort of patch it, he says, "I'll kill her soon," but we don't see it. I don't believe that it happened, and I think she will come back in the next couple of episodes and play exactly the role that Antoine does in the novel.
The role that we expect.
Yes. So, man, I am so excited to see how this works. I am so excited about how they move into season 2. My speculation that I hinted at earlier, in the trailer, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, but I don't
I didn't get the damn trailer.
Oh, you
I
didn't
haven't
see the
seen
trailer?
It. No, I don't know why I didn't get it. So tell me.
In the trailer, I don't believe that we see or hear anything from the modern day. We only see the past story. I wonder if episode 6 will not be in Lestat's voice.
Ooh.
I wonder if we won't see... I wonder if we won't see a scene or two from the honest-to-God vampire Lestat. But specifically, I wonder if they're not going to show us the attack on Lestat through his voice.
Okay. That sounds very exciting. I didn't think we'd get to hear from him until next season, but I would love to hear from him this season.
Having thought about it all this week, the fact that they put that in last week's episode, you see the snippet of the vampire Lestat in the diary there. I don't think that is just a hint. I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to get there even the beginnings of it this season. And I do think it'll be short because we're not really talking about Lestat yet. We're really talking about Louis still. And even the Claudia sections, you see Daniel do that. He's like, Louis says, just read. And Daniel says, just keep talking. You know, like Daniel's there for an interview with you. I want to hear your words on this. I can read this in my off time. I want to hear your words from it. So I think we might get like a snippet like that from Lestat. But it occurred to me, boy, that would be a way to really make that as affecting as this was. And also give us a little hint at what they might do with season 2. My speculation, lots of people are speculating this online. I think season 2, because we'll have lots of storyline without Lestat in it, I think we're going to get the vampire Lestat storyline alongside Claudia and Louis. Yes, I think we're going to get both of those running at the same time, and then they will meet at the end of season 2 in Paris at the climax of the interview with the vampire story there, as that all comes to a head. I mean, that's the way that it happens in the novel anyway. I think we're going to see it play out like that. And then
that's a really smart way to do it, because then you don't have to give up one of your great actors for a whole damn season.
Especially, as we said, you go into season 3 where you're barreling into the Queen of the Damned story in the modern day, and you've already got most of Lestat's backstory, the pertinent
done and
stuff,
taken
really
care of, yeah,
out of the way. I mean, honestly, they can dive into a lot of the Marius stuff and the those who must be kept. All of that could come concurrent with the modern day Queen of the Damned storyline, in a way that doesn't exactly play out that way in the novels, but I think that might make more sense, and you keep sort of like your themes aligned in your modern day storyline and your past storyline, you know?
Right. Yeah. Keep it on track.
Anyway, boy, aren't you glad we're getting to season 2? We could speculate about that already, like it's already locked in.
I know, I'm so happy. Can you imagine getting freaking just left hanging like it's Carnival from HBO? Bastards. I'm still mad about that.
I think all the time, I think about The Inside on Fox. It was like a serial killer cop show, and I think they made 13 episodes, and Fox showed 6 of them, 2 which were out of order, and then they never showed anything else again. Every time I think about it, I'm still pissed off.
Yeah, 2 seasons of Carnival, and they just left us hanging. Jesus
What a great
Christ.
show, too. That's not going to happen here. Speaking of the speculation currently, the rumors, the hubbub about Hollywood is that not only do we have season 2 of Interview with the Vampire confirmed, not only do we have season 1 of Mayfair Witches coming in January, the rumors say that there is a 3rd series from the Immortal universe of Anne Rice and AMC already in pre-production. What that could be, right?
Did they buy The Mummy?
Well, no, but you've got all these spin-off characters, right? You've got characters like Armand, who has a whole story to tell. You've got characters like Marius, who have a whole story to tell. I would have said 2-3 weeks ago that it was the Vampire Lestat, and we were going to get a spin-off show.
Off. Yeah.
I don't think we are now. I don't think we are. So is that 3rd show a Tales of the Talamasca, as I have speculated in the past? We get like something that skips through time and all sorts of supernatural creatures. Is it just the next vampire to get a spinoff? For instance, if our little buddy from Instagram that you referenced earlier, let me find that kid's name, by the way. It's the guy who plays one of the one of the Kent's sons on Lois and Superman. What is the kid's name? Yeah, so the Superman and Lois, the guy's name is Alex Garfin. He plays... Alex Garfin plays Jordan Kent. So it's Jordan Kent and Jonathan Kent are the two sons. Jonathan Kent, by the way, in the comics is a gay character or a bi character, I think, and is played as such in the show, I believe, too. I was thinking that maybe Alex Garfin was playing the son that was bi, but I don't believe he is. Anyway, Alex Garfin has followed Bailey Bass on Instagram, and Bailey Bass has followed him. They like every single one of each other's posts, and they comment on every single one of each other's posts. Alex Garfin in particular has commented a couple of times some version of from the first time we worked together to the last time we worked together or something like that, and they've never actually worked together yet, not publicly. So not that we're aware of anyway. So that's the speculation.
See, Alex Joel's been doing a little sleuthing.
Yeah, man. I had to chase it down. People were talking about this guy and he's made. Apparently, he deleted a bunch of old stuff on his Instagram recently and changed his quote to something that's like "You ain't seen nothing yet" or something like that. Anyway, if he comes, don't say that I didn't tell you. I don't know that that'll be our Armand, but I think it's possible. And if you cast a guy like that, maybe that's part of the deal is like, hey, you're going to be the primary villain of season 2. You'll have, and then you'll have your ongoing roles, but also we're going to tell your own story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what that third show will be. I don't know for sure that there already is one. And even if it is in pre-production, just like with all of these Star Wars shows and Marvel shows that spin up, and then some of them end up being, oh, now it's a movie. Oh, now it's not a show at all, whatever. Anyway, that's the hubbub. Now you know as much as I do. I'm super excited to see where this goes and super excited to see how they continue to roll it out. It's clear that it's been a success. The numbers are good. The ratings are good.
Yeah.
The reviews are good. And let's just keep watching and supporting and sharing it and watch this thing grow.
Hell yes. I'm here for every bit of it.
I really want to see my boys punch somebody other than each other.
It'd be nice, huh? It'd really be nice if they were mean to somebody else for a minute. Hello.
Well, I just want to see some. I just want to see some mean vampires, I guess, Ashley, so that we can punch vampires, and I don't have to feel so existentially bad about it.
So emotionally attached to it.
Yeah,
you can just enjoy the good old fashioned vampiric violence.
Folks, thank you again so much for all of you who are listening and giving us great feedback. And thank you for the conversations that continue on the Facebook group and the Twitter feedback. That's been really good. Had a couple of new people reach out to me over the weekend to say that, they just found the show and are really happy to see that there's one out there. There are a handful of us out there talking about this show, but we're glad that you've joined us for the conversation.
Yeah. Hell yeah. We are happy to be here and talking about it.
Yes. Any final thoughts on this episode before we all sing our sad songs all week long while we wait for our boys to again?
I feel like I've wrung myself out pretty properly about it. I felt a lot for old Claudia this episode, I'm not going to lie. But I'm looking forward to next week. I can't wait to see what happens. Can't wait to see the second to last episode. I have a feeling is really going to take us for a ride.
The next episode is entitled "Like Angels Put in Hell by God." I love the titles for the show, all pulled from Ian's work, of course. This is another good one, and we'll be back to talk about it next Sunday night. Folks, until we are back, we've been your hosts,
Ashley Wright Eiler.
I'm Joel Sharpton, and we are the Articulate Coven. Thanks for listening to The Articulate Coven. You can join our community on Facebook by following the links in the show notes or searching for Articulate Coven on Facebook. You can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or at articulatecoven.com. And share us with your Anne Rice-loving friends.